Hey guys, my name is Toby and welcome back to another very exciting tutorial where today we're going to be taking a look at the healing brush. And the healing brush is a really awesome tool that you should definitely know how to use. So let's go ahead and try and clean up this kiteboard, because as you can see, it's not exactly in the best state. It's kind of got water on it and scratches and all sorts of that sort of thing. And it would be lovely if we could get this looking like it was new again. So in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. You could do this directly onto a layer, but I think especially when you're working with a layered document like this, it's better to work on a new layer. So I'm going to press Command or Control, Shift and N, and I'm just going to call this layer Cleanup. And here we go. So now we have this layer. We could, in theory, attempt to do this using the clone stamp tool, but we do have one big problem which is not going to really work very well with the clone stamp, and that is that the surface of this, because of the way the lighting is, it's kind of a gradient, and the clone stamp does not like gradients. So if we try to clone in from over here, it's basically going to just show up like a sore thumb. And, you know, even if you try to sample from kind of the right point on the gradient, it's like you can do it, but it's going to be a lot trickier, and it kind of really limits where you're actually able to sample from. And generally, it's not going to look as good. You're going to see kind of just through repetitive mistakes where little bits have been done, and it's not going to be very smooth. So the alternative is using the healing brush, which works in much the same way as the clone stamp, in that you still have to hold Alt and kind of pick a start point to sample from. So I'm going to get to the healing brush by pressing J on our keyboard, or it's over here in this stack of tools. And we're also going to talk about the spot healing brush, but I'll get onto that in a minute. So the healing brush, like the clone stamp, you hold down Alt, you sample from where you're going to paint, and then you paint over the top of it. Now, where this differs from the clone stamp is that the clone stamp literally copies pixels. It will literally just, whatever you select, it will take everything that is there and just dump it somewhere else. So it takes the brightness, the color, everything. Whereas the healing brush, you can kind of think of it more like it copies texture. So for instance, if I sample from that point there and put it over here, you can see that it's copied that texture, but it's blended it in to this sort of tonal range of the gradient, so you can't really see an edge of where that's been done. But that's really, you know, not kind of what you want to do. You almost want to do the opposite. So generally you're looking for a clear area of product, and we're going to just paint over that. You know, you can do this really quite quickly. You can just kind of come in here and just scrub over a lot of stuff. Now, you obviously do want to be careful to avoid repeating patterns, so I think it's a good practice to constantly kind of be resampling and taking from somewhere else. Now, one of the cool things with the healing brush in particular, and this is where it's kind of better than the tool that I'll talk about in a second, and hopefully you'll see why, is that because you can sample like an edge, so you can sample this kind of line that runs up and down here, we can sample that edge and then place it kind of over top of this bit, and you can get it to heal stuff over the edge of something quite easily. Now, I haven't done a fantastic job of that, but you kind of get the idea. Now, the other tool, before I go on to the other tool, I will just mention, if you are working on a new layer like this, which I do recommend, you do need to make sure that your sample for the tool at the top here is set to current and below. If you set it to all layers and you've got things above this layer, that can cause you problems later on. If you've got it set to current layer, then, well, you're working in a blank layer, so there won't be anything in it to sample. So you need it set to current and below, and that's probably the best way to work, in my opinion, 99% of the time. So, now that we've looked at the healing brush and the fact that it's very, very clever and wonderful, let's talk about an even better tool, which is the spot healing brush. So this works in much the same way, except that you don't have to sample where you want to take from. The idea with this tool is that you just kind of paint over the thing you want to get rid of. Photoshop will work out a good area to source stuff from, and then get rid of it, blend it in, make it look like it was never there. And this is probably the tool that I would start with most of the time, because it's so quick and easy to do. You literally just kind of draw on the thing you don't want and it gets obliterated. Now, I said this is where I would start from 90% of the time, but it's not without its problems. So unlike the regular healing brush, this one doesn't deal with edges so well. When you come across an edge like that, it will tend to screw it up, but it won't always screw it up. I mean, sometimes it will actually do an all right job. It just kind of depends on what it is, and it's a little bit kind of hit and miss, I tend to find. But you can literally just kind of come over to things and just obliterate them very, very quickly and easily. Sometimes what can happen, I tend to find this happens more on skin, when you're retouching skin using this tool. In fact, it's kind of doing it a bit there. Can you see how it's kind of going like really, really smooth in these areas here, and it's not got the texture properly? That's kind of one of the downsides of this tool. Occasionally, if you kind of work it a bit too hard, that can happen, which is where you can go back to the regular healing brush. You can sample from this lovely bit of texture down here, and you can just paint the texture back in over the top of that again. So it's not, the end of the world. It just, sometimes it can kind of cause this like really ultra smooth effect, which doesn't really look very good. And it's just one thing to be aware of. But hopefully you can see that just in the few minutes I've been doing this, we've already cleaned this up significantly from what it was. And in fact, I have one that I did earlier over the whole thing using exactly the same techniques. And what a difference that makes. So that's the healing brush. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Toby, and we'll see you next time.